Good afternoon. We are the last presentation before lunch, so it means we're going to be short and entertaining. Today with me on stage, I have Isuru, or Head of AI at Toku, and I'm the CEO and founder of the company. For those of you that are not familiar with Toku, we are a cloud communication and customer engagement platform. We are focused for enterprises and large organizations and are also dedicated to APAC as a region to make sure that we are tackling all the challenges and the complexities to the markets that you every day are also operating in.
Hi everyone. So we are going to talk about how we are going to use AI, enterprise-grade AI. And before we get into the topic, I want to ask you one question. How many of you, raise your hand, if you are using generative AI like ChatGPT or any other form at your work?
That should be a lot of you, right?
Yeah. I can see a lot of hands going on.
ChatGPT or Bard at work. Of course, if it's not allowed, don't say it.
Yeah. So it's not a surprise anymore. That's why we call it the AI revolution, right?
Correct. And talking about AI revolution, what has been very impressive in our latest consumer research that we actually did with 1,000 Singaporeans back in June was to see that the technology of generative AI had already reached a high visibility for the general public. Because remember, mainstream ChatGPT, Bard models have only appeared in November of 2022. And already in June, 8 months later, you have 85% of the respondents knowing about it. There are not many technologies that are coming up in the market and are so rapidly being visible and being known by the general public.
It's not only ChatGPT. Well before ChatGPT, AI was here. And it was not that like all of a sudden ChatGPT came up, right? And some of the core concepts of AI are actually coming from the 80s. And well before ChatGPT, there were really good evidence to show you that AI has kind of superhuman capabilities, right?
Correct. And it's really the computational power and the new infrastructure that has made it possible to leverage on the theories from the 80s. And before going really in the core of today's topic, we wanted to cover a few examples, really to remember everyone that ChatGPT is not the beginning of artificial intelligence. It has started way before. And already in 2016, you had Google running an internal initiative where basically they wanted to reduce the power consumption within their data centers. And Google being Google, they obviously attracted the brightest minds in all the markets and globally. And so they had world-class engineers basically working on that challenge. And they delivered very good results. But still, they said, okay, why don't we run the results from our engineers into an AI model to see if there maybe are a few extra percentage points that we can win and that we can optimize. And they got a staggering results of another 40% improvement on top of what the brightest minds in the business had delivered. So that's a very significant applied AI example for the industry.
So not only for the industry, but also for games. In 2018, Google DeepMind built a model called AlphaZero. So sometime back, people thought if AI can play chess, that's it, right? That was considered as kind of the gold standard for some time. So what AlphaZero did was, it was introduced just the basic rules of chess, and it was tasked to play with itself simulated games for a few hours, and that was it. And it was playing in a level of like a world championship level. And I can remember some of the comments by famous chess players like Garry Kasparov. The AI model was so inventive, and they were surprised. Okay, this is not the usual style that a normal chess player would play. So that is pretty impressive. Well before ChatGPT.
Correct. And what you are describing actually as surprising for these well-known players in terms of the strategies and which pieces are being sacrificed is kind of a way of looking at how humans are thinking outside of the box. Right? And that creativity is something that we see in multiple domains when we are working with AI. it's not really creativity or it's not really out-of-the-box thinking. It's just that AI is capable of absorbing so much data and connecting dots that, frankly, the human mind is not able to. And that's where we are opening and pushing away the boundaries and opening new frontiers, where even in the pharmaceutical sector, MIT researchers leapfrogged the total drug discovery process by many, many years, simply by applying an AI model and asking the model to look at different molecules and all the data that was available from previous testing. And from that research, they were able to discover a new type of antibiotic. So you really see that here, before even generative AI, you had very concrete application of artificial intelligence in different sectors and industries.
Yeah, this is just the beginning, and the best is yet to come. Some researchers are trying to apply generative models for sophisticated things like theoretical physics. And they're trying to check if generative models can come up with theories like how Einstein did some time back, right? What if another equation like E equals mc squared coming from a generative AI model? So this reality that's in front of us might be a little bit hard for us to comprehend.
Yes, and you can hear from his excitement that we could very quickly end up in kind of a science fiction. So before going too far in what AI could become, let's look at the immediate future and what it means for enterprises. And so for enterprises to really start delivering and unlocking constantly on the power of artificial intelligence, there is a first issue or challenge that needs to be met, and it is the scalability. And when we are talking about scalability, it's really about the cost efficiency of applying artificial intelligence. The second aspect that is very relevant for enterprises is that it needs to be real time. But in order for something to run smoothly real time, we need to make sure that the output is predictable, which means that you need also to have control over it. And these are, from a helicopter view, two of the things that enterprises are today battling with and anticipating. We are going to look in more detail to what it's going to mean and what is expected from AI in customer experience before we move on to these different challenges and how to address them.
So here are some interesting Gartner statistics. They have found that around 80% of customer service organizations are going to use some form of generative AI for their products and services. And that is a pretty big number, right?
Correct. And while everyone already agreed that AI will play some kind of a role into a customer experience, 38% of you and of other leaders interviewed by Gartner are thinking that it will be the primary driver for customer experience improvement and retention of customers. And it is expected to play across three different aspects of customer experience. First, personalization. Secondly, the efficiency that you can get out of AI models. And of course, the scalability, not necessarily scalability related to cost, but scalability that can come from running automation at a large scale with an AI model.
We also should consider the challenges that lies in front of us. If you talk about challenges, there's a huge list, as you can see, right? But for us, at this moment, we would like to highlight a few that will be really important. So we are going to discuss about unpredictable outputs, model bias, and also how we are going to deal with regulatory compliance that is going to be coming in the next coming years, right?
Correct. And these three challenges are the ones that we discussed today. But of course, as you can see on the slide, all the ones listed are relevant. And depending on your industry, some will be more than others. But let's start with a few examples also to make sure that we are aligned on what is the risk and the challenge that we are talking about. So, unreliable outputs. I imagine that many of you have heard by now of what we call AI hallucinations. So hallucinations for AI teams and AI models is basically the fact that the output or the answer generated by an artificial intelligence model is going to be incorrect, incomplete, but sometimes also completely invented or nonsensical and doesn't make any sense to provide that answer in the context that you expected it to be. A very prominent example that came out in June of this year is a lawyer in the US that was going in front of the court for a case where he was defending an airline in a particular situation. And like some of you earlier in the poll, he turned to ChatGPT to brainstorm and prepare his defense and basically worked on the argument that he was going to present in front of the court. And he came up with a very logical list of precedents and previous cases that were basically proving his point. The problem with all this is that afterwards, the court fact-checked all these cases. And it turns out that all the cases that were named, some against Egypt Air or other airlines, never happened, never existed. The name of the cases were invented by ChatGPT. The date, the outcome, everything was fully invented, but seemed very realistic, even to the trained eye of a lawyer in the US. So you can directly see what kind of problems you generate if you cannot control the output of your AI model.
Yeah, like unpredictable outputs, the other very important thing is model biases. So as humans, we also have biased views, right? You are biased and we are biased. That's because of our experience. That's because how we learn things. And it's the same for AI, because AI is trained on data. And data can have different emphasis on different things. So it is the case, and this is actually a big challenge. A simple example is some face recognition models might perform well for white faces than colored faces because the data set is kind of biased towards white faces. That has happened. Another very good example is, if you remember, in 2016, Microsoft released an AI called Tay, and they put it in social media, in Twitter. And what happened was, it was performing well, but after a few hours, it was behaving weird, and it was posting racist and inappropriate content simply because it got the wrong feedback from the users. So it was biased from users' feedback.
Yeah, well, only a few hours on Twitter, and the AI model had to be removed. That tells you a lot.
Yeah.
So a third risk is, or a challenge in this case, is for enterprises to anticipate the regulatory compliance. So that is not new. For every technology, there always has been a time of lagging, a time that was necessary to the legislator to basically come up with the right rules and adapt to the technology. Those of you in communications are very familiar with that. It took years for the regulators to catch up with VoIP, for example. What is different in this case is the depth and the pace at which AI is progressing and basically pushing the boundaries and generating new use cases and therefore new potential problems and abuses. So the regulators are, at this stage, basically going in all kinds of directions, and there is no global framework to address this, which means that as a company, as an organization, especially when you are multinational, you need to anticipate that the rules you are going to face for the foreseeable future are not going to be streamlined and harmonized. You are going to have differences depending on the markets. We already see it in markets that have banned Bard or ChatGPT. Those are impulsive reactions, right? But overall, you will have a regulatory landscape that will be very different depending on the markets in which you evolve.
What's the solution? And that is proprietary data. We think this is the recipe, and this is what we need to have in order to navigate ourselves through these challenges. So the proprietary data is your asset, and that's more valuable than before. You can have base models from open source or cloud services, and it's important that you have the right data set to train, and especially if you talk about things like accuracy, right? The very first thing you want to see in your AI application is to perform in a proper way. So accuracy matters. A good example could be if you're running a contact center and if you're addressing a certain audience, let's say you want to apply speech recognition, but maybe due to accent variations and things like that, the generic models might not perform well. So why don't you train your model based on your own data. That is the best answer.
Correct. And in this case, training on proprietary data is going to basically be a solution to the unreliable output that we were mentioning as a challenge, right? But you also have proprietary data as part of the solution for the challenge of model bias. Because as we said, there is always going to be bias. In this case, bias is actually the tone of voice of your brand, because you are going to train the model on specific ways of reacting or answering and basically facing the challenges that the users are throwing at the model. If you are an insurance company, you will want the tone of voice to be cautious. You will want to make sure that all the information given is provided in a way that is factual, and that if the information is inaccurate or incomplete, there is some disclaimer provided as well in the output. So in this case, there is a model bias, but basically the model bias is going to be the tone of voice of your brand.
Other problem is regulatory compliance. And the problem with this problem is it's not fixed, and there's no global standard yet, and it will take some time to come. So what we will see is there will be different regulations in different parts of the world, different geographies. So how do we navigate through these regulations is the thing. So if you have your data, you can train models in a way that you can comply with the regulations. That's the best answer. Otherwise, we will always have to wait for open source or cloud-based services to catch up, and that will limit ourselves.
Correct. And at the end of the day, it's all about providing yourself with the right level of autonomy. Right? You don't want to be dependent. And that's why you have your own proprietary data. It's not the global solution to all the challenges you face as an organization when you deploy artificial intelligence, but it's a very important factor. It's really going to be a key asset for you in your AI strategy. And moving forward, we have a message from a very special guest that most of you will know, Sir David Attenborough.
Hi everyone. Toku is using my voice to demonstrate how AI has enhanced the usage of text-to-speech. Today, companies can leverage me to create more personalized experiences. For instance, I no longer have to sound robotic when greeting customers or providing verification details. I can have a more human and friendlier voice, and I could speak with different accents or languages so everyone can relate easily to my voice. Looking forward to seeing how more companies will leverage enhanced text-to-speech to create more personalized experiences in Southeast Asia.
Okay, thank you, Sir David Attenborough. What we did was, at Toku, my team took a challenge of selecting a very complex voice which has pauses and sudden fluctuations, and even sometimes a little bit of struggle to pronounce words. And you can see that David Attenborough's voice, due to his respectable age, is like a bit complex. And we've taken a real-time text-to-speech engine and tried to embed those characteristics using just few hours of data. This was trained using just 4 hours of data. And you can see how we can use proprietary data to enhance and customize, personalize the experience.
Right. And what is impressive here is not the cloning of a voice, right? We've seen that for a couple of years by now. It's really the process required to get to that stage, right? And the fact that it becomes more accessible and also more realistic. All the qualities of the voice of David Attenborough in terms of his respectable age, the complex respiration, the pauses, the struggle sometimes over a few words are making the human voice sound more realistic. And obviously, it's going to be a challenge for those that are counting on voice biometrics for the authentication. And I wouldn't throw away your SMS OTP right now. It's still going to be useful. But it's really giving a glimpse of what is going to be possible without a lot of budget or a lot of data sets in order to train this, right? Actually, to clone a voice today, with 20 minutes of voice, you already have quite a respectable outcome and quality. And the more you train, the more data you have, the more that quality will progress. So be careful where you share your voice recordings. So after this quick intermission, what are the benefits for enterprise-grade AI in customer experience, which is obviously the topic of choice for today? So there are 4 aspects in this regard.
Yeah, so we're going to highlight 2, mainly training and coaching and how we're going to use it for analytics. But there are other aspects like automations and how do we improve the productivity. We're not going to cover them in detail here. And now let's get into training and coaching, right? Knowledge base, right? I'm sure you are familiar with the word and you have used that, such systems. But the problem with traditional knowledge bases, they're good, but they are underutilized. Why? It takes a lot of effort to actually manually do this. You have to put the queries very carefully and get the responses and contextualize in your head and present, right? That's a process. Generative AI can help. As you know, generative AIs, they are zero-shot kind of capable, and that's why they can follow instructions. So they can model queries for you. Not only that, the outputs that the knowledge base can provide, it can understand and summarize properly and contextualize it. That's what you see in ChatGPT as an example. It will present you a summary of what you need to know, and then it will smoothly detail out things. So imagine a solution like that and engineering that for applications like Agent Assist. Agent Assist is a system where the new agents, or any agent basically, when they're talking to customers, right, the system is providing the right content. And in this case, generative AI can look at the context and provide the right feedback to the agent and provide right responses from the knowledge base. And not only that, if the agent is not following the right responses, it can also remind and, if required, even alert the supervisors. So generative models are not only used for generations, they are really good at classifications and other tasks as well.
Correct. And you will notice that the focus that we believe is going to be the first effort in terms of deploying artificial intelligence is not to replace the human, right? It's really about improving the average quality, assisting and controlling in a better manner basically your customer experience standard level. And in this case, it's not about answering for the agent, it's really about empowering the agent, making sure that they are much more efficient. And also, as a brand, being aware more quickly if you have an issue in terms of quality of responses. Because, as Isuru pointed out, if the prompts and the guidance provided by the AI model is constantly ignored by the agent, you will get flagged, and you will see that in your report, that basically the responses given are never following the guidance provided by the model. So moving one step forward, right? Insights and analytics. I'm sure everyone in this room is in favor of taking data-driven decisions, right? And we are constantly saying that in the corporate world, right? Is that obviously decision-making must be data-driven. And by now, our organizations have tons of data. The problem is, how do you extract the information that you need as a business team, as a business user, in order to make those decisions? So larger brands and larger organizations typically have what we call a BI team, right? A business intelligence team. But it takes quite an effort to actually go through the process of sitting down with the BI team, explaining as a business user what you need to see from the data. And then behind, having the team going through the process of defining the right queries, the right prompts, in order to reflect that information to you, right? It will take from a couple of days to a couple of weeks, which means that that effort in most organizations is done maybe once a year, and that's already a lot. So you will not take full potential and really leverage the data that you have. Moving forward, you will actually facilitate that whole process, and you will enable the business teams to directly talk and explain, in the same words that they would explain it to the BI team, to explain it to the AI model. And then have the right queries and right prompts that are generated automatically, not in a few weeks or a few days, but like in a few seconds. And behind seeing your data come to life with the information that you wanted to see. And if you need amendments, again, have that facility, that flexibility of simply mentioning what is not accurate or what is probably not what you expected, and the model will adapt. So it's really about enabling your teams to talk to the data and to visualize your data more accurately than ever before. So again, things that are not light years away. We are talking about things that are actually already possible now. But obviously not in generic models, but in proprietary models that you work on as an organization, as an enterprise. And to make sure that we have enough time for questions, right? We will go directly to the key takeaways. I think it's been clear during the entire presentation that we really advocate for keeping the use of generic models for what it should be, which is light touch and mainly in your personal life or maybe less sensitive work and decision making that you need to do, but having as an organization a real AI strategy where you don't expect generic models, at least not yet, to be an answer just by taking it off the shelf, right? And the key and common denominator across all that strategy should be your proprietary data. That's where the essence of the solution of the key resides. And then last but not least, you must see AI as you see cloud by now, right? It is not anymore a differentiator or a premium, right? You expect things to be on the cloud. If you are looking for a technology provider, you're not going to be impressed if they explain that they're on the cloud, right? It's like normal, it's the foundation, it's the baseline, right? That is going to be similar with AI moving forward. AI will not be a differentiator, it will be a way to stay within the expectation level. It's not a nice to have, it's a need to have.